Hey everybody, welcome to this week's live stream. Hope everybody's doing good and staying cool out of the heat if you can. I know it's pretty hot everywhere, it seems like. I mean, it's not super, I don't know, it's tough. It's pretty hot here, and I think this weekend is going to be pretty warm. It's already 83 in the shop. It got up to like 86 yesterday, and I was just like, it just kind of wears you out, you know, at the end of the day. But anyway, it's good enough. I got a fan blowing in the background, so we'll just push through. So today what I wanted to do was kind of continue what we were doing, but you know, in the past we did that experiment with the split cup, doing a two slit or whatever, like the, you know, a 2-compartment split cup, pouring it and then swirling it up. And the results were okay. It wasn't what I would consider like a slam dunk, where you don't even have to think about it. There's maybe a little bit of technique involved and, you know, stuff like that. And it may also depend on the colors that you choose, how this kind of works a little bit. Let me go overhead. So the first test that we did, and we poured these online, these are pretty good, but they are pretty like split, where there's like a lot of the kind of like yellow, brown, whatever. And then there's a lot more white on one side. And there's nothing really wrong with that necessarily, but that's not exactly what I would like to get something that's a little bit more, you know, equally distributed. And then I did another experiment on my own. This was red and white. This one, instead of just pouring it directly, you know, without moving the cup or doing anything, with these, I kind of moved the cup around, trying to get it to maybe, you know, even out a little bit more. But as you can see, these got kind of like, I don't know, they're a little bit bleedy. These don't have very good swirls. They do at the top, not so much at the bottom. Or, you know, I don't know which way that which way this is, but anyway. And then I use the stir stick on both of these. So what I thought we would do today, first of all, I'd like to kind of do a little experiment. We're not going to use the split cup though. We're going to just try and pour dyes together the normal method, the way that I normally do it, and just kind of give ourselves a little bit of a, you know, how does this compare kind of thing. I'd say the difference is if you're using a split cup, you're getting 2 colors pouring out at the same time, one on one side, one on the other. Now, if you could maybe spin the cup and not, you know, there's lots of different ways that you could maybe accomplish this with a split cup and get slightly different results. But the other way to do it is just, you know, you grab your cups, you got 2 cups and you just pour, 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 pour. And so I thought, let's try that. That's kind of, you're going to get color mixing, especially if you're using a white. It's a little heavier, so it's going to kind of change things. But in that sense, you're kind of stacking colors on top of each other, and they're, you know, they're kind of splashing together a little bit. But let's give that a shot, and let's do that. And I thought we could kind of discuss some of the, you know, your liquid pigment colors a little bit. It's always fun to kind of talk about that, but a lot of times I'm using mica powders on the stream. I don't use the dyes or the, you know, liquid pigments as much. So I thought it'd just be kind of good to switch things up and go for these types of colors. And down the road, what I would really like to do is eventually convert all of my team color blanks, which use the Alumilite white resin. I would much rather be able to pour those and make vertical blanks. That would be really fabulous. Then I don't have to cut bricks up. Then I don't have to buy 2 different resins. I can probably just buy more of the clear slow and maybe even get a little bit of a discount on it. But it's much easier just to stick with like one resin and use that. The other thing is, you know, and I always have to kind of reiterate, or I feel like I should reiterate, I don't use Alumilite white because it's some kind of an amazing resin. I chose that off the bat. Like, I mean, we're talking 12, 13 years ago. The big reason I liked it was because it was totally opaque when it cured. That way I don't have to ever paint tubes. That was honestly one of the biggest reasons that I got into Alumilite white, but it has so many drawbacks that I don't recommend it to anybody. It's a totally different animal than any other resin that's out there, the clear based resins. It has a 2-minute working time, which, I mean, a lot of people can't handle like the 5 to 7 minute clear slow, the like regular version. especially in the summer. I mean, you're only getting a few minutes. And so with a 2-minute working time, it's just horrible. And it's so fast that there's absolutely no way that I could pour vertically with that resin. The other drawback to it is you can't use mica powders at all with it. It doesn't work. Because it turns completely opaque, there's no pearl. It slightly changes the color of the resin, but it doesn't, like if you used Yamagata red, it wouldn't really be red. It'd just be kind of like pinkish, ugly. And so it's not a good resin to use. And frankly, I would rather just be able to switch. The problem I have is all of my dye recipes use that resin, which is totally different. Like they're not entirely convertible to just a clear resin because it turns opaque. It's a totally different game. So anyway, that's a long story short, or that's a long story long, but it would be nice for me to eventually, switch. So it's fun to kind of play around, and it's nice for me to be able to, utilize some of these experiments on the stream to not only share some information about, dyes and show you guys some tests and different stuff for your own use, but it also helps me out too down the road. Now, real quick, don't forget, we got the clownfish blanks. This is the newest design on my website. They're ready to go. I actually just made a couple more batches to restock a little bit. So those are ready to rock on the website. I'm going to drop a link for anybody that wants to grab some. I love these things. I haven't actually made a pen with one yet. I made these last summer, right after the Maui thing, and I used them for kind of giveaways and stuff. We were kind of, I think they were like, I think I used them, I think I gave them out to people that donated, is what I used them for. But I knew that I was going to add them, but they actually kind of sat in a box, like they'd been ready to add to the website. I just never got around to it. So I'm super excited to add these, things, you put something away and you don't even think about it. But eventually I'm going to turn one of these guys up, and I think I'm going fountain pen for that, custom. So let's see here. Let me go get a link to these guys. And don't forget, guys, all of my artisan, I call them artisan blanks, are available. These are all the newer vertical pour blanks, the round ones, and they're all pretty much. Actually, I think everything that's under the artisan line comes in the kitless 8.5-inch length or the 5.5 standard. So let me drop a link here and then see what's going on in the chat. See what you guys are up to. So David is enjoying the lathe at early in the morning. Man, it is hot, and I do want to warn people. I mean, make sure that you're keeping hydrated and stuff if you're in a shop and it's really hot. I know when I first got into woodworking many years ago, I was in Vegas at the time in a garage that was not cooled or anything. And I got to be honest, guys, like I'm sitting there cutting stuff on a table saw. I had to like wear a bandana because I was sweating and it was like dripping on the table saw. And eventually I kind of just quit doing it because I'm sitting there playing with, high speed blades flinging at me, and the heat, even though you may not notice it right away, it brings your level of attention down a little bit. You're just not as sharp. So just be careful if you're running, machines and stuff like that in the shop, and it's hot, or like really hot. Just maybe get a little bit of a break, cool down a little bit, get some water, and in some cases maybe don't even do it. If it's a dangerous situation, it's not really worth getting a few hours in the shop done. So let's see here. What else? Mark's printed 4 things. Yeah, that thing I know twice. I mean, at least that he's talking about the Bamboo Lab. I've had a couple of the FDM style 3D printers, and they just, number one, the resin printing is much better for turning, and not only for turning, for casting and all that kind of stuff, and you can get better prints, but it was a pain using the FDM printers. The biggest problem I have with the resin printers is you don't have out of the box, like you can just go get any color resin that you want, whether it be see-through or opaque. There's just a limited amount of resins out there, and when you start, I have added some of the Alumilite dyes. You can use like a base, like a white base resin or clear, and you can add some dyes and pigments, but the problem is that thing cures by light transmission. And so if you put too much dye in and it doesn't take that much, it starts really screwing. Well, any amount of dye that you put in there is going to totally screw up whatever exposure times that you had for that, for like, let's say like the clear or the white resin. It's going to totally jack with those things, and in some cases it's just going to massively increase the number of failures that you're going to have regardless. And so it's tough, but I plugged in that bamboo. I'm using it, for things like this. I wouldn't really want to have to mess around with the resin printers. The amount of cleanup and smells and all that junk is kind of a pain also with the resin. FDM printers are great because you can go get some file printed out, and it's wonderful, but I was having so many failures on my old ones and they were so slow that it was just, I never used them. I plugged in the bamboo and it was just like done, and I'm like, what? That took like less than half the time it would have taken on my old one. So I'm glad you're having fun with it. It's pretty cool. Let's see here. Pigments and dyes. Okay, so that's a good question, David. So if you're familiar with like, the Alumilite's line of dyes, and these are, it says dye on it, right? These are translucent, transparent, I would actually say, especially like yellow, red, orange. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. So those three are, like almost, it doesn't matter how much you add to the resin, it is going to be see-through. You could dump the whole bottle in and it's still going to be see-through. The blue, the regular, like standard blue, brown, orange, violet, that's another one. What other colors do they have? Oh, and green. Those are darker, but technically they are still translucent. They're transparent. But you can kind of get it to the point where it's so dark that you can't really see through it. And then you have white and black. These are technically not dyes. These are pigments, okay? So just to kind of give you, if anybody's used to the Alumilite ones, those are dyes, typically, most of them. And dyes as far as I understand, I'm not an expert when it comes to these, colorants and things exactly, but from what I understand, from what I've gathered, and I've looked at this actually, I got into this type of stuff many, many years ago, dealing with like wood finishes and things like that. And from what I understand, dyes are like super tiny particles of color, okay, like microscopic almost, like you can't see them. And they tend to stay in solution with whatever you're putting them in for the most part, but because they're so small, they give you color, but they're usually transparent. You can see through them. Pigments are bigger chunks of color. So if you have like a little microscopic dot for a dye, you've got kind of a boulder for like a pigment, and they tend to be opaque. And as far as I understand, it's mainly because the chunks of color are bigger, and that's why the light doesn't go through them. That's as far as I understand it, and I think that bare minimum, you can, like, if anybody knows more about it, let me know, but I think you can just kind of bank on those two things, that dyes, as long as, and the problem is people use these terms kind of together, so you need to kind of watch what's going on, but typically dyes are going to be that transparent type thing, whereas pigments are, bigger chunks. And they even call, like, it's, do they say it? Yeah, so like eye candy pigments, right? Mica powders are really big chunks of color, and so I think it has to do with the size of the color chunk that is creating the color, the hues. Now, one thing that I will mention though is you can use, and I've done this for many years, you can use the translucent things. So like, let's say you wanted to get an opaque red, but all you had was Alumilite dyes. You take your red and then add some white to it, and because this one's opaque, you're just coloring the white with red. Now the problem is you got to add, enough red to get over the white. If you add just a drop of red to white, it's going to be pink. So you have to add a lot more dye to do it this way, and you're limited on how much you can put in your resin, but you can get any opaque color using white dye plus a transparent, dye. Like I said, and it's hard not to say dye or whatever. Again, white is technically a pigment. The other way that, you know, is arguably easier is to just go get like the Divine Pigments. Eye Candy has their pastes, I think they call them. They're all kind of the same thing, but they're already opaque. You just order whatever color you want and it's already there. You don't have to be mixing and messing around, which means that you can technically use less of this stuff to get your color. All right, so that's kind of the difference between like dyes and pigments. As far as I know, that's it makes it easier to keep separated, at least in my mind. But I don't think that I'm wrong at all. I don't think there's any wrong information. I'm pretty sure the dye particles are very small compared to the pigments. So, you know, it's pretty truthful. I don't know if that is the, like if you talk to a pigment or a dye specialist, they may have a slightly different take on like what the difference is there. Let's see here, scooting down. You know, the thing is, mica powders I find are a little bit easier. One thing to kind of keep in mind also is dyes and pigments, liquid pigments, they tend to bleed a little bit more. The other thing that you have to keep in mind is, regardless of what type, if you're talking about like Alumilites dyes or Divine Pigments, no matter what, if it's a liquid thing, there is going to be what's called a vehicle. You know, all of these things, the pigments and the dyes and all that stuff, as far as I understand, they all start out dry. All right, so they're not much different technically than like mica powders somewhat. Just you can kind of think of it that way. But the liquid ones, what they have to do is add some liquid thing that keeps it in solution, but also is compatible with, you know, like your resin or paint or whatever you're putting it in. And so keep in mind that there is some extra liquid that's going in there, and these are generally going to be a little bit smaller chunks of color than a mica powder. So, and again, I'm not an expert on this, but this is the way that I kind of think about it. I think that the dyes and the liquid pigments, like Divine Pigments, they're a little bit smaller chunks of color, which means that they can kind of blend together easier, especially like dyes alone. You can put it in the resin, but they tend to be able to mix together. And so, you know, we always pour at the end of the working time if we're mixing colors together, because we want to thicken up that mixture so it doesn't just bleed and move around as much. So I think that the smaller the particle of color, the easier it is to bleed together. So that's something to keep in mind. I find that mica powders, you can just keep adding that stuff in there and they stay separated just a little bit easier. So I think they're easier to work with, and I usually recommend that for people that are just starting out. Go grab mica powders because they got every color under the sun. You don't have to worry about how much you're putting in or any of these other things. But that being said, dyes and liquid pigments are not hard to deal with. It's just, why not? I always recommend trying, you know, if you're literally pouring your first batch of blanks, try to get the easiest pot. Don't make some gigantic blank, and don't, you know, go for the mica powders to add color, just to make things really simple, where you can't screw it up kind of thing. So you get, you know, wins off the bat. You know, the idea is you want to get comfortable using these products, not, you know, make a masterpiece necessarily right off the bat. But mica powders allow you to make masterpieces without having to, you know, worry about things. But dyes are, you know, it's not like you have to wait 10 years before you can start using dyes. I'm just like, the first few that you do, it's much easier just to go with mica powders so you don't have to worry about things. Once you're comfortable with, you know, mixing the resin, weighing it, or volume, or, you know, whatever, all of the steps involved in the feeling of what's going on with the, you know, resin casting in general, then you can use whatever you want. Okay, so let's see here. Sorry, I'm talkative today, guys. I love the vertical pour molds too. I was like honestly afraid of them. I mean, I honestly 10 years went by and I didn't really get into them because I was like, I don't know what's going on. It's going to be hard. And so I kind of stayed a little bit clear of them. But man, I'll tell you what, there's a lot of good reasons to go vertical. I think. You just save resin, you know, you get more out of what you're doing. But you know, there are some cases where you have to do it in a block mold. If you're putting big chunks of stuff in there, obviously it's not going to fit in a 3/4 inch pipe. So, you know, these have their place, but for like simplicity purposes, vertical's great. Yeah, you can't use fluorescent dyes. Or, I mean, really, or the black or the white. Again, because the particles are so big, they're not going to be forced into the cellular structure of the wood. So that's, if you understand what the difference is between these different products, and you know, I think the simplest thing is, if it's transparent, it's a dye, all right? Like alcohol inks, they call them. I mean, that's like a dye, all right? Same type of thing. Which frankly, you can, here's a side tip, you can use Alumilite's dyes to make your own alcohol inks too, just to let you know. You're adding dye, and then the vehicle in this case is alcohol. The vehicle typically, I want to say, I don't know, this is something I don't know for sure, but my guess is for most of these dyes and pigments, the vehicle that they use typically is, oh man, I just lost the word. Shoot. It'll come to me. I had it on the tip of my tongue, and then I kept talking and it went away. I'll have to think of it. If anybody knows, type it out in the chat. Okay, so I don't think there's any other questions or comments here. All right, so let's get rolling. The first thing that I want to do, so I want to do one experiment. We're going to do one batch where we're going to go with a 2-color. And again, I've just found that 2 colors are a little bit harder to kind of keep from a lot of the first experiments that I did. I was getting this kind of result where it's not even so much that it's bleeding together, it's very tightly packed. Like, there's not enough bigger chunks of like white. The other color would end up taking over a lot of times. One color would be dominant a lot of times. And so what I found was 3 colors is much easier to get a better swirl in vertical pours if you're doing kind of smaller pours. And I think that the trick is, if you're only going to do 2 colors, you need to dump a lot more per color at a time. A lot of times we want to get, you know, nice tight swirls and get everything all mixed up. But the problem is that doesn't really work when there's only 2 colors. You don't have enough separation. So I think that you need to pour bigger amounts per like pour. And then you get a little bit better. So that's what I'm going to be kind of doing on this first round. We need to pick a couple colors. I'm going to go with, I want to try something out. Typically I would, you know, we'd open it up to the super chats, and if you want a super chat, that's fine, but I'm going to pick the colors this time because I want to try to mimic a team color blank, basically. That's why, you know, this one's kind of close to the University of Texas colors, but it's really not on. This would be good for, like, you know, Wisconsin, what else? Nebraska, and some, you know, red and white. That's a pretty simple one. So I think I'm actually going to go with, I think I want to try Divine's Abyss Blue. I don't know if that's, let me put it on the overhead. Just easier. Oh, that one. Abyss Blue. This is kind of like their, you know, a darker blue. So I just want to kind of see what that looks like in a clear. I haven't done a lot of testing with this stuff. I don't, you know, especially when I'm like trying to get a specific color. So this will just, we'll be able to see what does this look like. Another issue that you can sometimes run into with the Divine pigments is, although they're opaque technically, they're not that opaque in some cases. Jade, I think it's Jade Green is definitely a case for this where, like, it really doesn't get completely opaque. So some of them are very good at being opaque. Some of them are not particularly great at being opaque. So let's go with, and this one actually is another one. Abyss Blue can sometimes not be particularly opaque. It'll have like kind of, it's like semi-translucent sometimes. You got to kind of load it up a little bit. So we're going to go with blue, and I think I'm just going to go with white. White is a good one to test because, and this is just, all this is Alumilite's white resin dye. I just put it in a 1 ounce bottle, but I buy 16 ounces at a time. White is a good one to test out because it's heavier than all the rest of the colors. The titanium dioxide that they use for the pigment is heavy. It's like almost like it's literally like a rock. So you might notice when you pour white into your cup, it just sinks to the bottom right away. And even when you mix it in, that color, when you're pouring it, is heavier and tends to want to kind of sink a little bit more. So let's go with that for this first round where we're just testing 2 colors. Now the other thing that I wanted to do was another test. I got reasonable sized two chamber split cups, and I wanted to try out just doing boom, 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 like back and forth, and just kind of see how that goes. I'm not looking for anything special necessarily. I think it's going to work great, just like the triple. I don't think it's going to be much different in that sense. But for those, I want to go with, again, opaque, like an opaque pigment. So in that case, we need 4 colors. So if you guys want to super chat and pick some colors, I'm open to whatever. We're just going to mix up some colors and see what we get. I think what I'm going to do is I think I'm going to go with one of the colors that you guys pick. I'm going to build it using Alumilite dye plus the white, just to kind of show you that. But typically it's much easier just to grab a divine pigment, unless, like I said, if all you have right now, you got a full shelf of Alumilite dyes, you got every color, then you don't necessarily, unless Divine Pigments has exactly the specific color that you want. I guess the thing is, it can be a little bit easier to match colors. Well, I'm very biased. I know how to match colors using the Alumilite dyes. That's what I use for all of mine. I don't have as much experience. You can still, change colors and stuff. If you add a little bit of white to this, it's going to be a little lighter. But I kind of find that it's a little easier. You don't have to use as much of the dye because it's so, that's another thing, is Alumilite dyes are heavily concentrated, like super concentrated. So you don't need to use as much to get to like adjust colors a lot of times. I don't know. I think that's again, I'm pretty biased on, I have a lot of experience. I have a decade of experience mixing Alumilite's dyes together. I think if I had 10 years of messing around with Divine Pigments only, I'd probably have that down and say it's easier. Myra's going with purple. Sweet. That one's a little bit, I'm not going to use that as the mix, the Alumilite mix. That one's already pretty dark a lot of times. You can add a little bit of white to that to make it more opaque, but the violet dye is super dark. Especially if you start adding 3% or something like that. Well, that's about as much as you want to put in there. But, the more you put in of the violet dye, it's going to be pretty dark. And if you're going for transparent here's another thing. If what your game plan is, if your goal is to have just violet tinted resin, but it's totally see-through, literally, you're going to need to get like a toothpick amount and just kind of stir it in. That's all. This is so concentrated. The darker colors like that, especially like the blue, a lot of times. Green's not as bad, but it's pretty dark too. You're going to need a very, very small amount. So be very careful with the darker colors. Brown definitely is another one with the Alumilite dyes. The other ones, like I said, they're already opaque anyway, so. Mark's in for orange. That's a good one to go. That's a very good one for the, I'll mix that up. We'll go for an opaque orange. And we'll mix it up with the white dye. You had failures today. What were your failures? Let's see, Welsh Piper, are the Gatling gun molds easy to make? they're not hard. The thing is, you got to find something to use as the master pipe, you know, the thing. Mold, it's the same as making any other mold, so it depends on what setup you have, and you know how you know they're not that hard to make. No, I think the hardest part is creating like the master mold. That's where you have to figure out how to do that. The biggest thing that I will say, if you're making silicone molds, now I don't really care, even though I still take all precautions necessary, but for something like a faux burl mold, if there were some air bubbles trapped in this, it's not going to change anything with the final product. It's not like it needs to be perfect, but if you didn't get all the air bubbles out on something like this, and then you pressurize it, it's going to deform your mold. Like if there's an air bubble trapped in the silicone, then you pressurize it, that it's going to shrink that thing, and it's going to deform your mold. So you definitely are going to want to have a vacuum set up to degas the silicone before you pour it. Try and pour thin amounts so that any air bubbles like either pop while you're pouring it or rise to the surface. So the other thing that I do is I actually vacuum degas first before I pour it, then I actually pressurize it. That way, even if there is an air bubble trapped in there, most people, and you got to think about how are you going to use this mold, but if you're always going to be pressurizing it, then cure it in a pressure pot. Do both the vacuum stage first, and you would put your big cup of silicone when it's liquid in the vacuum chamber, suck all the air out, then pour your mold into the master mold. Then you're going to put it in the pressure pot and let it cure like overnight in the pressure pot. That way, even if there was an air bubble, and I'm going to try and make this, some of this stuff gets a little bit kind of weird, but if you didn't pressurize it and you had an air bubble, the minute and then once it cures, so let's just, I'm trying to make this, trying to explain this in a way. Even if you did the vacuum degassing, there is a chance that you could get an air bubble or two trapped in this. And if that air bubble doesn't like make its way out or whatever, if it's trapped in there and you've got a bubble sitting in the cured silicone, the minute you put that in, let's say you use your mold now, you pour your resin in, you put the thing in the pressure pot. When you pressurize it, any air bubbles that are stuck, that are trapped in the silicone, will then shrink, making, like, deforming the silicone around it, right? So my thought is, if you just cure the silicone mold in the pressure pot, and it's a mold that you're going to be pressurizing, what will happen is, even if a bubble somehow didn't make it out between the vacuum stage and the pressure pot, if there was still an air bubble trapped in the silicone once it's cured, and it's a mold that you're going to be pressurizing all the time, then it doesn't matter, because it cured in the pressurized state. So that would be the perfect, it's not deformed. Then when you release the pressure, that's when the mold may deform, but it doesn't matter after the fact. So just a couple of tips on silicone mold making. Silicone's easy to work with. I don't want to make it sound like it's like difficult, but I do recommend that you have a vacuum set up with a bigger, pot. I think that you're going to really, for the best molds possible, that's what you're going to want. Bruce has got green. Mike McEwen's in for some yellow. Okay, so we got yellow, purple. These are going to be kind of cool. There are some silicones that don't necessarily, like, they're very thin and they don't necessarily need like the vacuum step. So you can get away with it. It's just, like, if you want the best, I really recommend vacuuming silicone, especially if it matters. Like I said, if you're making like a faux burl mold where it's all bumpy and stuff, and like, who cares? You're going to turn it. It's not a big deal. The big thing with pen blanks, though, is you don't really want a big weird thing on the side of a pen blank. You kind of want them to be straight, not bent or anything like that. So these are a little bit more important, even though we're going to turn them. But definitely, if you're trying to make like a recreation, like a lot of these people are making like, you know, figurines and stuff, like you got to make it dead perfect if you're making an exact copy of something like that. So. Okay, so let's get things rolling here. Let me get these things out of the way. We got our mold. Let's get these blanks out of the way. And this will be kind of fun, I think, hopefully for you guys too, to kind of see, you know, so we're getting different, you know, attempts, different techniques to do kind of the same thing. So hopefully it'll be kind of helpful for you guys. Now keep in mind, no matter how you pour these things, it's still all like everything still kind of resides or you know, the biggest thing is you still got to get your timing right for when you pour the resin, like the temperature of the resin, because you could do all these different types of things, but if you're changing, you know, like when you pour it with that temperature of the resin, things are not gonna, you're not necessarily going to get the best results in some cases, especially if you pour it too soon. It's going to be very thin and it'll kind of tend to bleed together a little bit more. And that's the tough thing. You know, I did 2 different experiments. I'm pretty sure that I actually poured them about the same temperature and everything, but the red and white was a little bit more bleedy, let's say. Okay, so let's see here. Let's do for the first one, let's just knock this one out where we're doing the 2 colors, okay? And we're going to use the Divine Pigments Abyss Blue, and then we're going to just use white. All right? Let's see here. I'm going to switch to this camera so you can see what's happening. I'm going to pull out my little notebook. We're going to make a batch of blanks, blue and white. I usually mix up 400 grams for this. You can easily get like, I don't know, like I think if you could squeeze every drop, every ounce of resin out of your cup, I think these would probably take about like 360, 70 grams. I usually just go with 400 because then I use the excess to pour into one of the faux burl molds. I think that if you just want a safe number, 380 grams is plenty. That should work fine. However, if you're going to be using a mixing cup to mix it up and then pour all of the thing, you know, all the resin out into different cups, you still might want to go a little bit higher than 380, just because you know, the more cups that you have residue in, where you know you don't get every single gram of resin out when you pour it out of a cup. I would that's why I just end up going a little bit higher than what it is, because I typically do that. What I want to do is I'm gonna split this into 2 different cups. I'm not going to use my mixing cup because I want the resin to kind of heat up at about the same rate. So I'm going to use the same amount of resin in each cup. I'm going to pour it all into 2 different cups and not use the mixing cup. Again, if you use the mixing cup to hold as one of your colors, you know, so like let's say that I want 2 colors. Let's say I poured the blue in here and I did the white in this cup. The problem is, because it's a wider cup, it's going to be like a shallower but more spread out amount of resin than it would be in this for like the same amount of resin. What ends up happening is this one can heat up at a slightly slower pace because it's more spread out. The more kind of compact the resin is in the cup, the faster it's going to heat up. So just want to let you guys know, we're going to go with 2 different cups on these. Let's clean this guy out. All you got to do is just crack it a little bit and then pull this one was a little bit thin, but oh, that worked out pretty good. There's always this little thing in the middle. It's harder to get out. There we go. I got that. Sometimes in these cups you get a little bit, it just doesn't want to come out so easy. And then I also like to kind of like, there's always like these little frays around the edge. So I like to pull those out as much as possible. And then now we're ready. Let's see here. That's why you just buy mine. Yeah. I want to mention also, guys, I'm gonna be buying because I'm just frankly intrigued by them. I want to try them out. Check out Olive Frog. So Nikki, she hangs out on the stream sometimes, but Nikki makes some fabulous molds as well. Vertical, and she's got some pretty, this is one of the reasons why I'm actually going to buy some of these things from her, because obviously I can make my own, but she makes some 11 inch or something like that, 11 and a half, or what was it? Let me look this up. 11 inch, yeah. So she's got some that are 8.5. I don't know if she has any 6s. She can probably make that for you if you really wanted it, but on her Etsy page, she's got some molds. They're 4 blank molds. There we go. I got the link. So I want you to check those out because mine are pretty expensive. Hers aren't cheap either because she does them all by hand and all that stuff. But she's got some different options for you guys where this is pretty much, this is all you're going to get from me. This is all that I make. I don't even sell, because I do have taller ones that are 8.5. They're a pain to make, and it's not, I can't make them for people. I don't even want to make my own, frankly. So anyway, but Nikki has some 8.5s. They're 4s. She also has one that I think she's going to come out with different sizes and stuff for, but they're a 6 blank and they're like a triangle, so you could fit like a lot of them in a pressure pot. They're pretty cool. So she's awesome. She's the one that was doing my 3D modeling for the different 3D prints and stuff. She is fabulous at this stuff. But she's got a couple different things. Go check those out. Like I said, I don't know that there's any that are lower than 8.5 inch tall, but she's also got 11 inch tall ones, which can be very useful for certain people. So I think I'm going to pick up like 1 or 2. I need to talk to her quick because I'm actually kind of interested in the 6 blank one, but she doesn't have an 11 inch tall in that one yet. But I think she's going to be coming out with them. The other thing is she also makes some that are 7/8 diameter and 3/4. So you got a few more options where, like I said, this is what you're getting from me. It's a 7 blank Gatling mold that's, about 6 inches tall. So just wanted to kind of spread the word there. But we'll test it out. Once I order them, we'll play with them on the stream. And then of course you also have the P-Town subby ones, and they're still excellent. And they're going to be a little bit cheaper, most likely. So these are the 3/4 by 8.5. One of my only problems is I like to, if I'm going to say that I'm selling an 8.5 inch blank, I want it to be 8.5 inches, or like pretty darn close, like within a 1/16, let's say, something like that. And so I'm not a big fan of being like, well, it's somewhere between 8 and 8.5. That doesn't help people. So the problem that I have is these are 8.5 dead on, I think. And so your resin kind of sinks a little bit, so you don't get a full 8.5. And I think that Nikki's might be like that too. That's why I made my own. As you can see, because I wanted 8.5. I wanted to be able to cut the tops off and get, so mine are just a little bit taller. But I don't sell these, so the big ones. So, but P-Town has, they even have a 12 blank, or is it 12? They got a gigantic one. You can get it at Turner's Warehouse. 12 blank, I think it's like a 5 1/4 inch tall blank mold, but 3/4 inch, but you get 12 of them. They get this huge thing. They also make some 7/8 inch, different sizes. So there's lots of options for vertical molds out there, guys. I'm very curious about Nikki's though. She does some good stuff. Okay, so number 1, let's see, what day is this? 7/20. Number 1, we're doing pigments. Number 1. So we're gonna mix up 400 total. That'll be 200 and 200. Now I'm gonna go for, I want to add as much dye as I really want to load them up. So I'm going to go with 3 grams of dye, or liquid pigment in each one of them. Okay, so we're going again, Divine Pigments Abyss Blue. And this is the Alumilite white dye. Divine also has a white as well, and there's no effective difference. I would say though, there is a slight different shade. I think that the Divine Pigments white is just a little bit more like true white, like whiter than this. It's very hard to tell. Like, we'd have to make samples. I don't have any on hand right now, but Divine White is pretty good too. Okay. Now, again, what I'm going to do is we're going to pour this into these cups, and then I'm going to try a technique where I pour one, pour the other, pour one, pour the other, and I'm just going to do them like basically because usually I would go around and do all this stuff. I'm going to try, because I don't do this usually, so I want to try this type of a technique where you fill up one, move on. The nice thing is you don't really have to move much to do that, and pick up and put down and do all that kind of stuff. 2 colors, 2 hands. Let's see if we can do it. Let's just give it a shot. Now it's 84 degrees in my shop, so we're going to probably wait till about 115 Fahrenheit before we pour them. I'm actually going to go with 205. Oh, or more. 206. A little bit more than that. Just to make sure that I got enough for each one of these cups, because I'm not going to use this mixing cup. And I want to have some left over. All right, look at that. Nailed it. Yeah, I use Plat 25 for these guys. Plat 10 is better for things where you need to peel it out. That has a lot of, they call it undercuts, like there's a lot of details. It's softer. So those are basically the two that I use. Another one that works, if it's hot though, I don't recommend using this. Alumilite has one called Mold Maker. And it's pretty cool. Technically, you don't really, this is one that they don't necessarily recommend that you vacuum. Part of the problem is it's only got a 6 to 8 minute working time. So like you got to kind of move quick with this thing. You're not going to be making something like this. This is for smaller things, but this is actually FDA approved. You can make like chocolate molds and things like that, but it stirs together extremely well. So it's not like you got to like whip it up to get it mixed up. It's just kind of slow, deliberate mixing. For smaller molds, this stuff works pretty good, but because it's got like a 6 to 8 minute working time, which is kind of ridiculous, like if it's 85 in your shop, you're not going to have much time. So I don't know that I would recommend that for like the first time person. And there's other brands of silicones out there, tons of them. I really like the Plat 25 because it's pretty thin. Some of these silicones are so thick that you really can't stir it by hand. You're gonna get tired. It's like mixing up molasses. And so I don't like it. Smooth-ons, I think it's called like Mold Star or something like that. 25 or 30 or whatever. It's something somewhat similar to the Plat 25 from Alumilite. It is so thick that I just refuse to use it. It's just not fun. And thicker silicone is gonna trap more air bubbles when you're mixing it. I don't understand why they need to make these things so thick in some cases. So if you can find a silicone that's thinner viscosity, I don't know. I don't know what I see no drawback to a thinner viscosity. I see no advantage to a thick one. Until you get to the point, there are some where you can like paint it on, but it has to be like, it will not sag kind of thing. So that's a different kind of ball game there. We're just making a mold, a normal mold. Give me the thinnest thing possible, you know? I mean, that's how I feel about resins too. I don't really like thick resin. All right, so we got 200 there. I'm gonna just add my 3 grams. Let's just mix up this Abyss. Toss it in there. Oh yeah, humidity too. Zero that out. And that gets into some other issues. This isn't really a silicone thing, and I don't want to confuse people, but there are two different types of silicone bases. There's platinum based and tin, like they call it platinum cure and tin cure, TIN, like the metal tin, like a tin of Altoids. Tin cure is generally a little bit more user friendly, and it doesn't react with things. Water, like humidity and moistures don't generally cause too many issues. Okay, so this is really not. So this is the thing. Like I said, you can really kind of see through this. So I'm not loving that. Like I would actually want to add white to that to make it more opaque. So that's the thing, is a lot of these things seem like they're pretty dark, opaque, let's say. And the reality is they're really not, you know, so you got to be a little bit careful. Most of the divine pigments are opaque. So you don't have to worry about most of them, but some of them are not particularly. So, all right, I'm going to add my 3 grams of white to this. Now, one of the other things I was saying that Alumilite white resin, so that other resin that I use, the other problem with that, especially if you're trying to like match colors, is you really can't just mix like right now, you know, I got my resin is like mixed up, like ready to pour in my cup. You can't just be like, oh, what if I add like a drop of white, yeah, like in the mixed cup of resin. You can kind of play around with things like I'm about to do when you're dealing with a clear base resin, but when that Alumilite white resin, when it cures, it, like if I just mixed up part A and part B, didn't put anything else in it, it would cure dead solid white. You can't see through it at all, white. All right, and so that causes issues. You can't just look in the cup and be like, oh, that looks like about the color that I want, because what's going to happen is it's going to also impart a ton of white. So you can't just willy-nilly it. So I'm going to add, we're going to have to do two things here because I want this darker and I want it opaque. So I'm going to add 0.5 grams of white, and I'm going to add 0.5 grams of black, I think. Just try and darken this up. The problem is I'm adding white, which is going to lighten it, but I want to reverse that a little bit by adding some black. So let's just see what this little concoction does for us. Because I want a dark blue. I'm looking for like a navy blue kind of thing. Ooh, that worked pretty good. Okay, I don't know if you can see the difference, but I mean, that's navy blue now. And I don't think you're going to be able to see through it. I might have been able to just add black only to that, because black is also opaque. I didn't really think about that at the time, but that's what I was going for, so that's nice. Okay, let's see what temperature we're at. 107. We're going to wait till 115 on this. I think that's the number that I want. So hopefully that gives you an idea of how you can utilize, you know, the definitely opaque colors like the white, the black. You can just kind of add those things in with something else, but you have to watch how much total you're putting in the cup. You can only add so much dye to so many ounces of resin, okay? Typically, definitely you do not want to add more than 5%. I would actually say 3% is really where I would cut things off, typically. We're at 113. On the white, let's see what we're at in this cup. It should be about the same. Oh, that one's at 115. So we're gonna get these, I'm gonna get these sticks out of the way first. I don't want them in my way. So let's get this thing right overhead-ish. Yeah, I'm really terrible with my left hand. I'm missing the hole, it seems like. Whoa! So, told you guys I'm not very good at the two-handed approach. Definitely messier. Whoa, I added way too much. Okay, I gotta quit doing that. That's not really working. So what I'd rather do, I'm just so much better at it this way, picking it up, putting it down. So whatever whatever feels comfortable to you, do it that way. Unless you want to experiment a little bit. I'm just not very good at it. Two-handed. I have no coordination. Now I'm dumping quite a bit of resin in there, and I'm really not going easy on it. I'm dumping these things. Like, I'm not trying to like, oh, is it gonna bleed or do anything? I'm pouring resin in here. And a little bit more white on there. Okay, and then we want to use our stir stick on these for sure. I'm going to dump this in there for a quick minute here. Okay, so I like to get my gloves just a little bit wet before I do this. It just kind of makes that second part where I kind of peel the excess resin off the stick. Makes it a little bit easier. It's going to end up being that way anyway, so you may as well just get your fingers wet off the bat, I find. So I'm curious to see how these go, because I was just like, I'm dumping. Let's dump. Now, one thing that I really need to do is mark the two that I poured a little bit differently. I don't really know how to do that. I got an idea. I know how to do that. So what I'm going to do to mark those two, it was these two. I'm just going to, that'll just cure there. It's these two, okay? Those are the two that we did a little bit differently. I'm going to wipe my fingers off so I don't get resin all over my pressure pots. And I want to be careful not to let that toothpick move. All right, into the pressure pot we go. I'm using I think I got time. I'll give you an overhead. I haven't done that for a while, so this is the California Air Tools. No, not, is that right? Who makes this? Yeah, California Air Tools. I think. Yeah, California Air Tools. I had to think about it for a minute. It's been a while. 2.5 gallon. This is like my favorite pressure pot on the planet. Comes out of the box like ready to go. There's no messing with plumbing and all this other junk. The only thing that you have to do is set the regulator, which involves just turning the dial a little bit. That's all you're doing. There's no tools, no nothing. It's great. This has been this is by far total, like, I bought it. It wasn't that expensive, really. They've gotten more expensive. That's why I kind of hesitate a little bit with saying that. But pressure pots are more expensive nowadays than they were when I first got started, is what I'm trying to say. But it's a relatively cheap pressure pot, and I'm just dumping the excess. Sorry, guys. I wanted to get that done before it like really sets up. A little bit more white in there. No, I don't want to wait for that. Anyway, that pressure pot is the simplest, and I have had zero problems at all with like leaks or anything like that. I literally took it out of the box, hooked pressure up to it, and it has just worked. I haven't done anything to it. No maintenance whatsoever. So I can't say enough good things about that one. I like the California Air Tools 5 gallon also, but if all you're doing is small things, there's no reason to get the 5 gallon. Especially like if you really don't see that, if you're like, oh, maybe someday I might, want to make a bowl blank or something like that, something bigger. But that's like years down the road. Like, you're really not sure if you're really actually going to do that. I would highly recommend just getting the 2.5 gallon now. And then if you decide that you want to make bowls, go get a 5 gallon also. Then you got two pressure pots that you can use, because the 5 gallon will hold any amount of little things, but on a day-to-day use, you notice I don't have a bunch of 5 gallon pressure pots around here. I make pen blanks. That's pretty much all I do for the most part. Here and there I do have a 5 gallon down here, but these are the ones that I use all the time, and it's so much easier to get a 2.5 gallon lid on, to get everything like locked up on these smaller ones is a lot faster. I mean, obviously there's still 4 screws, you got to screw it down, but much easier, quicker. And then the other thing is it actually will pressurize a 2.5 gallon. I mean, if you have a 5 gallon compared to a 2.5, it's going to take longer to fill a 5 gallon. So if you're like if you're running up against the clock and your resin is setting up on you, it will get to pressure in like 2 seconds in a 2.5 gallon. It's going to take longer, probably twice as long, if not longer, depending on which compressor you have. If you've only got a 2.5 gallon compressor and you're trying to fill up a 5 gallon pot, it's going to have to turn on every single time. So there's a lot of good reasons to get a 2.5. But if you're like, I'm going to be doing half bowls and half pen blanks, then go get a 5 gallon as your only pot, because it'll do everything for you. And you only have to pay once at that point, you know? So anyway, I just wanted to kind of share that. Like I said, it's been a little while since I kind of showed. Usually I'm like just kind of rushing around. And I like to wipe off all the resin off my sticks and all that kind of stuff, just to kind of, it's ready for next time. No questions asked. So what do you guys think? That was a little bit kind of hectic looking. I was just kind of dumping resin. But I also wanted to do it that way. Sometimes I'll be a little bit more careful when I'm pouring, but I don't know that it really makes that much difference, honestly. I mean, it may make a difference in the final outcome a little bit, looks-wise, maybe. But that's why I wanted to do that. Can you just dump and run? You know, like willy-nilly, whatever. Let's see how those things turn out. So let's go for it. All right, so let's see here. Yeah, sometimes the this is Alumilite Clear Slow. Sometimes the raw materials, don't freak out if you order Alumilite Clear Slow and it's like yellow in the jug. This is the part A. What ends up happening is they get raw materials to make the resin from like different suppliers sometimes, and sometimes the raw materials produce in the bottle a yellow resin. As long as you mix it up and it cures like nothing, everything's fine, you know, there's no problems with it, it's fine. It's just the raw materials are creating a more yellow part A, but it should be dead clear. That's another thing, is test it. Like if this does happen to you, if you order, you know, a couple gallons of Alumilite Clear Slow, do a test and just pour like a pen blank or something small, just dead clear. Don't add any liquids or any dyes or anything like that, or micas. Just do a little sample and it should come out dead clear like normal, and it should fully cure like normal. All right, so if that's the case, then the resin's fine. If there's a curing problem, or it turns out like the final casting is yellow, you got a problem, call Alumilite or whatever. It doesn't matter what resin it is, what brand. If you're having an issue like that, then you need to call them and have them replace it. Okay, but as long as everything's fine, this happens a lot actually. It just has to do with the raw materials that they use. I know I freaked out the first time that happened. I'm like, oh my God. And I'm buying like 10 gallons at a time. So I'm like, what is this? But it's not a big deal. Let's see here. Oh, you guys are having humidity. Yeah, we don't have humidity here, really. So that's nice. What's the height of the blanks you can put in the pot? Okay, so the tallest thing that I get is this mold. And I want to, at this point, you know, you guys can see that I have 2 different types of pressure pots here. All right, so this is the one, and the thing is, they didn't have, it's fairly recent that California, that anybody, and as far as I know, California Air Tools is the only company that makes a 2.5 gallon pressure pot that's ready to go, fully assembled, everything, no plumbing or anything required, on a 2.5 gallon pot. And this came out, I mean, it was only like 2 or 3 years ago that they made these. They'd been making the 5 gallon that way, where it's just ready to go, for many years. And it's a good pot. That's another good one. But they just released this one. So if they would have been making these years ago, I would have bought these. This is the CA Technologies. Okay, so it's very confusing, I understand, but CA Technologies. And these are excellent pressure pots, but there is a little bit of a difference. And at this point, these things are so expensive. The C8, the silver one, let's just call it silver one, blue one. These things are so expensive, I can't even possibly recommend anybody buy these at this point, especially when, and these don't even come fully assembled. Okay, it's way more money, not fully assembled. Get this one. This is the one to buy. It's probably like half the price. But these are very good. But there is a difference. These ones are a little bit shorter and wider. All right, so there's a little wider diameter, which is kind of nice. It makes it a little easier to get like a 5x6. This fits in here, super simple, no questions asked. That's part of the reason why I bought these, because I was doing pen blanks with these types of molds. But a 5x6 mold will fit in here. You got to be a little bit more careful about getting your hands in there. It's pretty tight, but it fits fine. But this one is a little bit taller and just a hair skinnier. I think this one's like a 10 inch diameter. This is a 9. But then you have, and this is the only one I have of these, so I can't measure the depth. But I know that I can definitely, with a little thin flat, I've got, I might even have I'm not sure. I've got a little thin kind of flat thing. This is like a 1/4 inch that's flat, because all the pressure pots are dished. And I don't want to set that on there. It'll cause weird things going on. You want to have a flat, hard surface in the bottom. So I use these little shelves that came with one of those, came with this thing. But I think you could just use the thicker disc and it'll still work with an 8.5 inch. So this is like 1/2 inch, so double thick. These are great. Turner's Warehouse carries these too. You just pop it in the bottom of your pressure pot. But let me measure this real quick. I think it's like 9 inches tall. Actually, it's 9.5, I want to say. Hold on. Getting the tape measure out. Yeah, about 9.5 inches tall. And this fits in that pressure pot. Close. It's very close. And frankly, you don't really want to have a ton of resin on the top of this, because it could actually get on the lid. It's a little bit close, but 8.5 molds will fit in one of these guys. Okay. And then that compares to the 5 gallon. Now, if you're going to be using Nikki's 11 inch ones, you're going to have to use a 5 gallon pressure pot. They will not fit in a 2.5. So just to let everybody know about that too. Always make sure that your molds, whatever you want to cast, is going to fit in your pressure pot. That's a good question. Yeah, I love these things, and it makes me mad because there's California Air Tools and TCP Global, like they have like the same exact products. And a while ago, many years ago, Casey Martin, he was kind of talking to TCP Global. They were kind of doing like a little bit of like a, I don't know, partnership kind of thing together. And I was like, tell them to make a 2.5 gallon pot that comes ready to go for like all the people that cast. They're coming out with like 15 gallon pots and all these weird things, and I'm like, just make a 2.5 that's ready to go out of the box. But I don't think they ever even did. Maybe they do today, but frankly, I wouldn't even mess with them. Just go with the California Air Tools. You can get these at Turner's Warehouse. There's a link actually to that pressure pot in the description of this video, or this live stream. And I get a little kickback on if you buy one of these guys from Turner's Warehouse. But I always recommend, because people are like, well, you could just get it on Amazon and it's cheaper or it's quicker or whatever. Here's the deal. Even if it's a little bit more expensive at Turner's Warehouse, if you have a problem with your pressure pot, there is a person to call, and Chad knows these things. On Amazon, good luck. You know, you can send it back probably, fairly easy, but nobody's going to be helping you if you're having issues with something on your pressure pot. So I always recommend just go to Turner's Warehouse, get it there. If you don't want to do that, then I definitely recommend going to like Woodcraft, because I think they sell it too. Go somewhere local, and they can maybe help you. Although I will say that typically, not everybody at a Woodcraft is really going to know anything about pressure pots. Again, still, Turner's Warehouse is your best shot. They ship quick, but you have someone that you know knows what's going on with these pressure pots for sure, uses them daily kind of thing. So that's why I always recommend Turner's Warehouse. No matter what, I don't really recommend using an Amazon company or whatever. Don't buy it on Amazon. I think that's not a good idea. Okay, so let's switch to the overhead. All right, so it's time to do this little other random split cup. And so you guys saw how terrible I was last time, but I don't know. It seems like it's going to be easy, and then it's really not. I don't know. I'm going to finish out this whole thing doing it this way, though. Back and forth with 2 cups, even if it makes a gigantic mess. I got a bucket to contain my mess. And I'm usually not, well, I don't know. I was going to say that I'm not that uncoordinated. The thing is, I am pretty uncoordinated, except for things that I'm not that bad at. So, whatever that means. I'm just going to toss that. All right, so I might have to go back up and look at what all everybody. I know that there was purple. There was an orange that we're going to use the Alumilite white with. So let's go with number 2 here. You guys can kind of see what I'm doing. Number 2. Again, we're going to go with 400. We're going to have 4 colors this time. We're just going to do even colors. So it's 100 grams. I don't know why I'm getting a calculator out. 100 for each color. And let's see here. So I know we had orange. And one of the nice things is we can kind of, what I'm going to do is I think we're going to put 1 gram of white. We're going to start off with, I don't know, like I don't really do a lot of this where I'm mixing, like white with some other color. I don't make team color blanks or match colors doing things this way very often. So we're just going to kind of play with it. But let's go with like 1 gram of white dye. And then we're going to try, I don't know, let's just try like 1 gram of orange to see what that looks like. And again, the beauty of, if you're doing this kind of thing with Alumilite clear slow, or any, and it's not Alumilite, it's just any clear resin versus that Alumilite white resin that I use for my team color blanks, you can tell what the blanks pretty close. I mean, it's not exactly, perfect representation. Once they cure, things look just very slightly different. But I mean, whatever the color is, and is it opaque or not? Like, you're gonna know in the cup while you're mixing it up. Like, it's not that hard. You're like, oh, I need to add a little bit more white. It's very simple to do that when you're using a clear resin. That Alumilite white stuff, I mean, you have no clue what's gonna happen. So all you can do is make thousands of samples, because you don't know what the end result, you have no clue what the end result's really going to be. Oh, I let these guys cure. Shoot. They were good stir sticks, but they came to the end of their life. But yeah, so anyway, it's a pretty simple process. We'll be able to kind of tweak things on the run if we need to. And then we're going to go with a violet. Let's just see what 1 gram of violet looks like. We had yellow, and was it red? What was the other one? Orange, yellow, green was Bruce. Okay. So we got yellow. They've got a really good yellow. I like this, the Divine Pigments. And this one generally I think is this one's opaque. You don't have to really worry. Like I said, there's some of them are not that great. Some of them are great. And then green, let's see here. Now, one other thing that I didn't really talk about a whole lot is like the fluorescence. And most of you guys have probably seen me use these. These are like in the middle. They're like a semi-opaque kind of thing, semi-translucent. I would consider these a pigment for sure, because it isn't, you know, it's not see-through in the bottle. So I mean, it's larger chunks of color to get the fluorescence. You're not ever, you know, there's no amount of like fluorescent dye that you're going to be able to add to the resin to make it totally like 100% opaque. I just don't think that you're going to get there. It's going to be just slightly translucent. So tubes, you're going to want to paint the inside of the blank. Now, I do make a blank using, you know, those fluorescent dyes that turns out pretty opaque if you're just doing like a kitless. You know, there's no tube. You can definitely see through the cap in certain parts. But for the most part, the orange, now at the bottom, again, it just depends on a few different things. There's some yellow in the bottom of this, and it seems a little bit more transparent. But the orange turned out pretty good in these. It's fairly opaque, I would say. I can't see the converter or anything in there. But if you've got brass tubes, you know, like right up against, you know, you glue it in there and it's literally right up against the surface, that's where you really aren't going to get it to where you're not going to see the tube. So I would go with a white, most likely a white tube, paint it white. Now for the yellow, let's just see what like, let's go for like, I'm going to go with 2 grams of the yellow, which this is sunny yellow. Okay, 2 grams of that. Violet is going to be the Alumilite dye. And you know, again, this bottle's like 900 years old, so that they've changed their labels probably a couple times since this. But all I do is when I buy this stuff, I just buy a big one of these guys from them. And then we had green. Let's see here. Orange, violet, yellow. Green. Okay, so they've got it. Oh, let's go with DOD. Do they have that? Do I have that? Yeah, let's do this one. This one's a pretty cool one. DOD green. Violet. Yeah, I don't know. That should work. I don't know. One of my favorites though is key lime. What do you guys think? Key lime or DOD? DOD is like dark. Keep in mind we're going for kind of other bright colors. Somewhat. DOD or lime? Let me know. Yeah, good bringing that up, Homer Lex. Pigments, again, they're bigger chunks of color. And this is why I like to explain these things so that you kind of understand. If it's got a big chunk of color, it's most likely heavier than a dye, so you definitely want to be shaking it because those bigger pigments, they tend to sink to the bottom in the bottle. Dyes generally don't. So, you know, like there's no need to shake up the violet dye from Alumilite, orange, red, blue, green, ocean blue, yellow. The ones that you're gonna, or brown, you don't really need to shake up. The ones you're gonna have to is all the fluorescents from Alumilite brand, black for sure, and white for sure. Okay, the rest, they're just dyes. It stays, they're so small, they just stay suspended in the liquid. But you're gonna wanna shake every single one of the divine pigments, for sure, every time. So we got white, and then we want orange here. Some white and orange right there. Let's see here. Lime, lime, lime. And if you're not sure, shake the bottle. If you're like, I don't know if this is a dye or, you know, whatever, just shake it every time and you're guaranteed it'll be good. But these, you really want to give these a good shake. And one thing that I'll say, I really don't love this style of bottle. I really prefer, and frankly, I'm going to buy my own. I like these better. Now the problem is this tip, if you don't puncture a hole in it and you start squeezing hard, the whole tip pops out of the bottle. So there's problems with these, and everybody's had that happen to them. All you got to do is take like an ice pick and just, shove it through the tip to make sure that it's good. Some people cut the tip. I don't like doing that, but these things I don't like because they're messy. There's no cap to put on it, and you always forget to close the thing. And then if you pick this up and start shaking it, and this thing's not closed, you're gonna have dye everywhere. So, and even if it's closed, I'm gonna give you a little example. So you see the top of this thing? There's dye on this. If I grab this like this, and I start shaking it like this, chances are there's gonna be little dye pebbles that I'm shaking all over the place in my shop. So if you've got a bottle like this one, grab a paper towel, cover it, and shake it this way. That way you're not getting stuff all over the place or all over yourself or in your eye. It just, oh man, it's just not fun. So it looks like lime is the way we're gonna go. I kind of agree, I like the lime. Key lime is technically the name of it. This is one of their older bottles. At least it had a top on it. That was kind of nice. I like the idea of this thing. They just, in practice, in reality, I don't love them. I really, again, I'm kind of biased because I've been using these forever. This is what the Alumilite ones came with originally. But frankly, I just think they work better. I can just cover it up and shaking's not a problem. All right, so green, we're going with key lime. Let's go with 2 grams there. Sunny yellow, Alumilite violet. Now again, Alumilite's violet dye is really not opaque. It's just super dark, and it's like kind of opaque. So I don't know, if you're gonna do a kit, it may show through, maybe, but we're gonna kind of look at it when it's in the cup and just kind of see how we feel about it, this 1 gram per 100 grams of resin. We'll kind of be able to look at it and see what's going on. Keb's here, what's up, man? All right, so let's see. Let's go grab another cup. That one is the one I just used. Just gonna squeeze it, pop the bottom out. That one's not working so well. Let's try another one. Oh, there we go. That's a much better one. I kind of find these paint mixing cups versus those are like to-go cups. The to-go cups I like the shape of, but I find that they don't really, like, they release the resin sheet, like the cured resin. Like the first 5 times it just like pops out, but then the problem is over time they become harder to get everything out of. So I kind of like the paint mixing cups better. I just like that those to-go cups are a little bit skinnier. So a lot of times I can get away with just leaving, one color in the mixing cup. This one, it's pretty wide, and it just seems to, I don't know, the resin doesn't, whatever color's in that cup, depending on how much you have, just generally tends to not heat up as quick. Yeah. Yeah, I'm telling you, it makes me angry, and I'm, frankly, this is the thing that really makes me mad. And eventually I'm just going to spend the money on it. But so I have a 5-gallon CA Technologies pot, and I don't like it, frankly. It's not that great. It was super expensive when I bought it. These things, I want to say they're $1,200 or something like that. It's some outrageous number that, like, who on earth is going to spend that much money on a pressure pot? It's especially when, and that's definitely a case where you can get the California Air Tools, the blue one from Turner's Warehouse, but 5-gallon. You can get it for so much cheaper. It's about a third. I want to say it's about a third the cost of the CA Technologies one, and there's really no effective difference between them. Well, there's one big difference. The cheaper one comes fully assembled, no plumbing required to mess around with getting your pot set up. It's ready to go. Yeah, so don't buy CA Technologies. Just go get the California Air Tools. They're cheap, they're ready, and they work great. And frankly, I mean, I've had a lot more seal, you know, like leak issues. Because I have a lot more CA Technologies ones, but I've had, you know, a couple of them that, like, I mean, it took some serious work to get these things to not leak. All right, so I'm gonna go with 205. Actually, yeah, that's okay. I gotta kind of hurry, so I'm gonna try not to sit here and talk the whole time. 100 grams. I think I can use these cups. Dyes are a little bit harder. You can pour the dye in ahead of time. I don't really like doing that because you may not get all the dye off the cup, which may or may not be problematic, but I don't like it. I'd rather pour the dye into the resin. Personally, it just makes for less problems. What worries me is that there could be like a blob of dye that doesn't get like mixed and could end up in the, you know, in the cup or whatever. Oh, that's way over. That's okay. Still within the realm of okayness, but you really want to try and make sure that you're pretty even on your A and B mixtures usually. But anyway, I don't know. I've had issues where there's uncured resin in the blanks, or uncured dye, like it didn't get mixed in, and it's just dye. It's liquid dye, and you cut into it, and it's not fun. So I just don't like messing with that at all. So I try to, if I'm going to be adding dye, anything liquid, pigment, I'm going to pour it into the resin in the cup, not in the bottom of the cup. This is up to you. I don't know how often, you know, you could get it to where there's uncured dye. I just really don't like it when it happens, so there's a way to fix that. So I just do it that way. So we're gonna kind of hurry here. I'm just gonna go with 1 gram. That should be pretty dark. Come on. That off of there. Whoa. Whoa, Nelly. Getting a little excited. Doesn't matter that much if it's perfect, but I'd like to get it close. All right, so we're going 2 grams of the yellow. Hopefully there's enough in this bottle. I don't have to open a new one. .1 is close enough for me. Okay. Go with some lime green, key lime green. Two grams. There we go. All right, now this final one, we're going to create our own orange. We're going to go with 1 gram of white and 1 gram of orange dye. We're going to see how that looks. We may need to add more orange. We may need to add a little bit more white. I think the white is probably going to be plenty. And you know, I'm not going for any specific orange. You know, things change when you're actually really trying to get like a specific shade, like your color matching stuff. Things get much more difficult at that point. All we're doing is we want some orange and we want to make it opaque. So I think really the only thing that could happen is the orange, like we don't have enough orange in the mixture. It's like too light. And another thing that you can do is you can add like a drop of orange and you're going to get like you'll get your like pastel colors, you know, or a few drops. You know, you got to kind of play around with it at that point. But look at that. That's a pretty nice looking orange right there, guys. What do you think? And it should be pretty much totally opaque when it cures, I would think. Can't see the stick. That's usually my test. Can I see wood grain or anything? Now, just make sure that you mix this again, even though we dumped it in resin and did all that kind of stuff. Make sure that you scrape the bottom of the cup very well, and make sure you get all of that white resin, or I mean white dye, mixed into your resin. That's, I would say, the biggest drawback to doing that white, you know, like a half and half kind of mixture kind of thing. Just make sure that you get that dye mixed in and scraped off the bottom of the cup and everything, because the white tends to just sink to the bottom and it can kind of stick to that cup a little bit on the bottom there. This is our violet. We want to look at that also and see kind of how transparent is this. You know, we can add a little bit of white to this if we want. It's pretty dark. I mean, it could be see-through a little bit, but I mean, I really can't see the stick, so I think we're okay. And even if it is a little bit see-through, like whatever, not that big of a deal. I don't even think it would be totally necessary to even paint the tube on that. You know, the violet is so dark that I don't think the brass would just like stick out like a sore thumb. And then here's our not canary. That's still a little bit kind of light. Like I said, you got to kind of watch out. The divine pigments, sometimes they're a little bit on the transparent side. So, you know, as always, the thing is, if you just paint the tube, you should be fine, right? Because that's the whole problem. Like, these are opaque enough to look pretty good. Now I got to get going here. I'm going to dump the yellow, and I think I'm going to go with yellow and orange in one cup. Now, purple and yellow tends to sometimes bleed, and you end up with like kind of a I don't know, like orange or brown or whatever. So I'm going to keep those two colors separated from each other. We're going to go with purple and violet. I mean, sorry, purple and green in the same cup. So just keep that in mind. I always find that yellow and blue and even purple and yellow, those things are gonna bleed. Even orange and blue kind of bleeds sometimes. Can. The pigment based things generally don't bleed as much as dyes. And again, my theory is because dye, the particles of color are so small that they can kind of get mixed together. You know? All right, I think we need to pour. I did pretty good there. It'd be even better if I was like good at a little bit of practice, and I think I would be pretty good at doing this. You could even do, you know, pour them at the same time. I really like that green and purple. I think that would be kind of a cool pen blank because they're two different types of liquid, you know, dye or whatever, liquid pigment. I'm going to call it liquid colorant. That might be kind of an interesting pen. Get that, and boom. Kind of out of the... So that's the one problem. If you're going to do it like this, you might kind of find that you poured too much of one of them in. Okay, so let's go for our stir stick here. Wow, that's kind of an interesting color mix, guys. Where's the hole? There it is. I think I need to kind of hurry here. That resin's pretty hot. I'm not going to rush, but I don't think I have time to just sit here and mess around, you know? I'm going to go over on this side here. I think those are going to be some pretty cool looking blanks. I'm not going to switch the camera because I want to get these things pressurized as quick as possible. And again, this is kind of the advantage. This is why I like having my 2.5 gallon pressure pots for pen blanks, because I can get them in, slam them down, and you know, we're good to go. Now I'm going to clean off, I like to clean off the little lip here, the mouth of these guys as soon as possible. Like, you know, I don't want it to cure, because what ends up happening is it's just curing a layer. So the next time the resin's got to pour through that layer. I don't like that. I also like to kind of clean off the front. Just clean these guys up, and you should get a number of uses. Somebody, it was Kevin Zog, was asking, can you reuse these cups? Absolutely, but you know, we're leaving resin in here, so eventually, you know, you're gonna have to chuck it because there's just no more room to put resin in. It'll be filling up. But you should, I mean, you should get a number, quite a few uses out of these things. Now, yeah, that's fine. Okay, like more than 10, I would say for sure. You know. So I think that's reasonable enough. These things don't cost. If you got a 3D printer, this isn't that much filament, really. So I think it's okay, you know. I don't really feel like, oh, I'm just wasting filament on these things. And I got to get this thing wiped down. Now, one thing that can make your life a little bit easier with some of the cleanup is to just have a cup of denatured alcohol or acetone. I would probably, if you're going to do this, go with the alcohol. You don't really want to be sitting there breathing. You don't really want to be breathing either of them, but acetone tends to, I was going to say dissolve, that's not the right word, evaporate quicker, but it's also a stronger smell. So you can have just a cup of denatured alcohol sitting around on your desk and then just drop your stir sticks in it. That will clean them, you know, without you having to wipe every single thing off. I just don't really want to leave a cup of that stuff sitting around. So I don't do it personally, but it's not a bad way to go. Personal choice on that. If you're diligent and you're like, okay, I'm just going to use this today, and then you, like, you know, put a lid on it or put it away, I think that's a pretty reasonable way to go at that point. My problem is I don't trust myself to put it away, so I just don't. Just as easy to wipe these things up for me. And then I like to wipe them all off. Just in case there's, you know, in this case especially, we were using dyes, and if I went back and grabbed one of these things, which I sometimes do, reuse it, if there's some dye on there and I'm going for a specific dye color, then I may have screwed up my recipe. So, and I do a lot of like the team color things, so I usually just clean everything off right away. That way I don't have to worry about that. I don't think it's really necessary for most people though, most situations. So what do you guys think about the blanks that we made? I think those I think that second batch, those crazy colors. See, that's the thing, is like micas are really like, you know, they're all pearly and pretty and everything's cool and they're like, you know, swirling around. Oh yeah, we did do the stick. Dyes are really neat when you're using just the pigment based stuff, or, you know, like solid color, you know, dyes in blanks. The one thing I will say is you can get color combinations that really don't look that good at all together with those in some cases. You can get a little bit more, you know, there's definitely more bleeding that can happen with dyes, or, you know, dyes, liquid colorants compared to micas. And really, I don't think that I've seen, the only thing that I didn't really love, it just, I was like, I don't really feel like making a pen out of this kind of, you know, kind of thing, was the original split cup. Where the heck did that thing go? The original split cup blanks. I didn't love them. It just wasn't appealing to me. That was the only time that I'm like, you know, I don't love this mica mix, but it was all kind of blended together and it was kind of weird colors. So that's one, but we were using like kind of a special pouring technique to do that just didn't really pan out, in my opinion. I didn't love it. If you're just pouring blanks like normal, I have never seen a mica combination, I don't care what it is, that looked terrible. You generally, that's why they're a little bit easier. Like, just micas are kind of like the super safe bet, but, you know, I don't think that liquid pigments are, again, I'll say, you know, like dyes, and I would even bulk this into, even if you're using dyes with the white, like we did for the orange, I still think that might bleed a little bit more than if you're going for just a straight pigment. So the divine pigments, I would say, are probably the next step up, where they're not, you're not going to get that many issues with them, with bleeding and things, and they really make some awesome looking blanks in the end. They just, you know, they just pop out at you. And you can get some really interesting color combinations together. And of course, if you're going for matching colors, if you were going to make team colors, or, you know, like a whatever, something that represents your business or something like that, a lot of times those are a more representative, I think, doing just a solid color like that rather than like pearly colors. A lot of times it's just more representative of what you're going after, because most things like that don't have sparkly pearly things as their colors. They're like flat, you know, not flat, but just like a gloss color, no sparkles in them. So I think that, you know, that's why I like the dyes. That's why all my team color blanks are made that way. I also want to mention one other thing that's possible. Now we used actually those like yellowish, goldish ones. I didn't polish those. I should have polished one of those. Well, those don't even, that doesn't look that good. One thing that you can also do with liquid pigments, or, you know, dyes, liquid colorants, you could add something like a macro sparkle. I'm going to go overhead if anybody's not like familiar with this type of thing. Like macro pearl, macro sparkle. You could add something like this in with that, with your you know, liquid colorant, and that can add a little bit of it's not really going to be like a pearl, but it'll, you know, it'll add a little bit of something to just a straight color. That's one little trick you can do. You can add glitters in there. Just keep in mind though, if you're going to do that, if you add a ton of dye, you know, like pigment, whatever, the color, if there's a ton of color in there, then the sparkly stuff may not really show up. And actually, if you're going for pearl, just add pearl, white. Just add a white pearl, or even you can add, you know, if you're doing an orange, you can add a little bit of like tangerine orange, and you'll get a little bit of pearl in there, but it'll be more heavily, you know, like just the dye color kind of thing. So there's lots of different things that you can mix and match with these things. I think one thing that looks really cool is when you mix and match solid colors with pearls. you know, if you're doing your pours, and you've got, you know, like Yamagata red in one cup, and you've got I don't know, let's like a purple, a solid purple. You can get some really interesting blanks doing that, using the different types together. So let's see here. Yeah, I don't even know if it's $2 in filament that I used on those things. Depends on which size cup, you know, you make, but I really don't think, I want to say that I make these little molds for my silicone, for the faux burl molds, and it's like 30 cents maybe for that, and it's, you know, I mean, it's thinner and all kinds of stuff, but anyway. Yeah, the cups are not the cup files. I didn't make those. They're just Surge split cup. Yeah, on any of those things, and they'll pull up. Let's see here. There's warehouse. Yeah, $300. That's not bad for a 5-gallon. I mean, I'm pretty sure this was like years, many years, like 8 to 10 years ago when I bought this one, and it was like 600 or 700. I don't know. It was really expensive. It might have been that far back. It might have been like 500. I think it was more than that. I mean, it was ridiculous. But I really liked, at that time, the options that you had. I really liked the fact that these, here's the thing, the CA Technologies pots are excellent quality pots. I'm not going to, you know, knock them. They can absolutely handle up to 80 psi without even any questions. I mean, I actually was talking to the guys at one of their booths at like a trade show thing. And they were like, yeah, oh, and they just like nonchalantly were talking about like 100 psi, like it doesn't even matter, like whatever. And they're like, well, you know, we just get it tested to this, but I mean, people are using them way higher, and we've never had a problem with any of them. And they're built like a tank. So that was the thing, is back when I bought all these things, I was trying to figure out with some of the other brands, like what is the max PSI really on this pot, and like what can I safely run these to? And like at one point somebody was like, I wouldn't go over 35 in this, and I think that was TCP Global. And I was like, I'm done. I'm just gonna go with CA Technologies because I know what they do. But they were cheaper than Binks, because that's what, like, if you want the gold standard, like there's no way this thing's going to last forever. Those are great, but I mean, they were well over $1,000 for the 2.5 gallon one at that point. And I'm like, that's not worth it. So CA Technologies at that point was all right, but it's gotten to the point where these things are so expensive. I couldn't even imagine somebody spending that kind of money on one of these things. But at the same time, I also don't, I mean, unless you just have absolutely no budget, I really do not recommend getting the Harbor Freight. It's a piece of junk. Like the quality is terrible. For a little bit more money, I would much rather you just save your money and get this one. You know, like wait a few months, save up and get the good one, because it'll last longer. It's going to work better. Even just the screws compared to the Harbor Freight. The Harbor Freight has like the tiniest little wing nut things that are impossible to like cinch down. And this one's got the, I like this system much better, where there's a flat washer and it's pushing down. Like there is no, one of these pots is over 10 years old and there is almost no damage at all on it. Whereas the Harbor Freight, the way that thing works, there's like a pin that just it's just pressing onto the lid, like a metal pin. You're just damaging the lid. And I'm like, this thing just can't last that long. I wouldn't trust it personally. So no to Home Depot, no to CA Technologies. I just don't think that they're good ideas. And none of those come ready to go out of the box. I mean, it's just, I just shake my head. Why did we have to wait this long for things that just come out of the box and you can use? Let's see here. What did you turn, Mark? I'm not sure what you turned. It sounded like you just did some really crazy. Sorry, I'm trying to, I don't know what that conversation is about exactly. Well, it depends on how much you pay for your filament too, though. You know, some of these things you don't necessarily have to go with the, you know, special filaments or anything. I don't know. Home Depot is California, yeah. Ah, you got a 5-gallon pot from CA. Yeah, they're good. Frankly, I don't even like this super ridiculously expensive pot. I want to get a California Air Tools 5-gallon. The problem is it's a completely unnecessary expense. I feel I don't like that pot. It's a weird pot in the first place, but I also just want to use a CA or a California Air Tools one in my shop. It's just, do I really want to spend $300 for no real need? The thing is also, this thing leaks, and I'm lazy, and I don't want to have to fix the stupid things. So I'm like, I'll just buy another pressure pot. So, oh, one of Jake's, I see. That's cool. Yeah, so anyway, we'll see what these guys look like next week. Turn one of them up. Whatever. I have a feeling I'm not going to be including the blue and white ones in the boxes, the subscription, the Pen Blank Club boxes, just because, you know, unless you're a, you know, Notre Dame, or not Notre Dame, a Penn State fan, or I don't know, I guess the Detroit Tigers, or you know, some team that's blue and white. Unless you're a fan of them, it's kind of hit or miss, you know. Mainly, I was doing that for myself to kind of see what does that look like. So, but the other ones, I think these are going to be pretty awesome. So they're probably going to go in there, and I'll make more. At this point, we're past the point. There's more subscribers to the Pen Blank Club than I can do in like one batch. So I'll have to make more of them, but obviously I'll make them the same exact way. So anyway, Chad talked you out of the 5-gallon. Yeah. Yeah. And like I said, I mean, really, if you ask me, if budget isn't really that big of a deal for you, I highly recommend, even out of the off the bat, if you have the money, what I would do is buy a 2.5 and a 5, right off the gate. Then you can do whatever you want, and you have 2 pots. That's the biggest problem that I have. You know, I mean, I gotta wait bare minimum for these things. You got to wait about 4 hours to pull these pen blanks out. So you're limited as to how many batches you could possibly do in a day. And if you're trying to sell them, or you're a pen maker and you want to get these things done, or whatever, you're just impatient like I am, you can run too, get a couple batches going, and you're good to go, regardless of what you're putting in there. But that allows you to do bowl blanks, or whatever you want. The tall 11-inch blanks. If you were going to get the big tall ones, that's the only way you could do it. But again, if money is an object, you got a budget, you can only get one of these things, but you do know that you're going to be doing 11-inch long pen blanks, or bowl blanks, or whatever, that like you're pretty certain that you're going to be doing larger things, just go with a 5-gallon. And you're just going to have to deal with lugging the lid around for the smaller things. If you're really like, I don't know if I'm ever going to do bowl blanks or 11-inch tall pen blanks, then I would definitely just go with a 2.5-gallon off the bat. And if you need to use, if you get into something that requires a larger pot or a taller one, then go and buy another one. I really think that both of them is really the best way to go if you can swing it, because that way you're not hindered by anything. And even if you're pretty certain you're not necessarily, like right now, you're like, I don't really see that on the horizon, doing larger things. But you do get into it. I think that, we all spend a ton of money on random stuff. Like, that's not a bad purchase down the road if you do decide you need the larger pot. I think that that's money well spent. Now you got 2 pots, you can double your output. So let's see here. What was did I scale the multi? Yeah, I had, scale the multi. Yeah, I got to be honest, I don't know what scale I used. This guy doesn't have a notebook for 3D printing. So that's something I should add. The thing is, I have the files on my computer. I want to say, to be honest, I want to say that what we just did was very close to 100%. I want to say it was like 115, maybe, for the one that we just did. 110 to one, something like that. This guy was like 125. I want to say this is a pretty gigantic pot. Like that was a pretty big one. And then I don't know. Obviously, I've got numerous different sizes. I want to say these were maybe like 80%. Maybe, I don't know. I can't remember, honestly. But it wasn't like wild. It wasn't like 200 or 300, and it wasn't like 20%. It was, I want to say all of those cups are somewhere between like 75% and like 130%. So they're not too bad. Binks is 9. Oh, they're not over 1,000 anymore. How is that even possible? They used to be like super expensive. So anyway, guys, I think that hopefully, like I covered a lot of different stuff with these dyes and pigments. And if you have any questions, leave those down in the comments section below. Don't be afraid of these. I did mention that I think mica powders are the easiest. And then dyes, there could be more problems, but that's not a reason to be afraid of them. They're fun. And if you do run into an issue, that's fine. Okay, just don't, just ascertain what caused the issue, and don't do it again, kind of thing. But you're not going to run into problems. I mean, I was just willy-nilly pouring these things. I wasn't trying to be careful or doing anything weird. We nailed our temperature. That's important. It doesn't matter what you're using. You need to nail that temperature, get that kind of dialed in pretty close. But at that point, dyes and the pigments, or whichever way you go with all this stuff, they're all pretty easy and fun to play with. I think that dyes allow you to dial in a color like dead on. If you really want to put the time and effort into it, dyes will allow you to get whatever color on the planet you want, within reason. Let's say there's still a few colors that I've never been able to match, but most colors are not that difficult to match up a little bit with a little bit of experimentation. A lot of options all out there. Micas just are simple, and eye candy's pretty much got every single shade of color that you could possibly think of. So it depends on what you want to go after, and I still recommend that beginners, if you're literally going to be doing like your first pours, and you want to make pen blanks or something colorful like that, just get mica powders, make your life easy. You just don't have to worry about much. Get used to the resin casting stuff, how it works, then start introducing different things, larger castings and dyes and all these types of things. Try not to bite off more than you can chew right off the bat. Get some good wins out the gate so you're having fun with it. Then start experimenting once you're comfortable with resin. That's my main thing. But once you're kind of used to the process of casting, dyes, I mean, we use all these different things every week and they're fun. So anyway, I think that's about it. So next week we'll see how these things go. We'll turn up one of these guys, one of the colorful double, let's call it, mixes, and it should be pretty fun. So anyway, guys, thanks for joining the fun. Thank you to everybody that super chatted. I appreciate all the support, and I hope you guys have a good rest of the day. Stay cool, and get in the shop if you can, if it's not too hot, and make something fun. So anyway, if you guys try some of these pigments out, make sure to tag me on Instagram and Facebook, and I'd love to see what you guys make too. So anyway, guys, I will see you all next week. Have a great evening, and like I said, stay cool.